Okay, thank you very much for this really a great honor for me and a wonderful opportunity to be part of such an interesting and illuminating indeed course that is both designed to help understand better the situation of Africa, in Africa, but also to encourage and support international cooperation. So my function is today, the way that I see it, both quite easy, very difficult. The fact is that I'm going to try and introduce you into a common endeavor, that is to say, an effort that was undertaken between African partners, the European Union colleagues as the major funders of the effort, and the International Center for Science and Technology, which I have the honor to represent. And this partnership would actually be serve more to exemplify what we are after when we try to arrange for this international exchange and interaction, which is in fact the core mission of the ISTC, my center. But it is it was an African-led initiative, which was given the impetus, the beginning in South Africa in a conference, in a regional seminar rather, which was held in the autumn of 2014, whereby a lot of observations were made by representatives of nuclear regulators from the southern part of the continent about the usefulness to try and secure the transportation. Needless to say, transportation of uranium ore is perhaps the most vulnerable part, one would say, in the need to secure both safety and security of the deliveries, because when in motion, and particularly in challenging environment, those are very important and very one would think vulnerable in the sense of exposure parts of the whole system of securing the nuclear material. Therefore, what was aspired after is a harmonization of the uranium oxide transportation regulations, as well as training of local experts through a capacity building effort to secure transport methods and procedures definitely defined by the IAEA. Moreover, this training was meant to meet the expectations of the public and the stakeholders. Outreach activities were considered necessary in order to spread a sustainable nuclear security culture to the extent possible in the region. And we followed through the implementation of these ideas the well-known paradigm whereby this security culture implies awareness, communication, understanding, cooperation, and harmonization on a regional basis, and hopefully sustainability. So this was an effort which I repeat for a third time, was meant to support rather than propose to local counterparts in the face of the nuclear regulators of SADC, this Southern African Development Community Organization. And of course, it was meant to contribute to the approximation also of export control regimes in Southern Africa. However, this endeavor, which the European Union embraced, had to split into two parallel but separate actions, twin type of activity, one would say, and this results maybe surprisingly for some of you from the internal structure of the instruments of the European Union in support of such capacity building, whereby the pilot project on transport safety was designed to support, to involve Tanzania, Malawi, Zambia, and Namibia, practically the countries from which, through which, whose territory and which, whose ports this shipment of Yellowcake take place from mine to seaport for the purposes of export. And also it envisaged a case study to be capable to provide recommendations to local governments for the border controls, the material accountancies, the safety of such transnational activities. What was not explicitly said, but was quite clear from the beginning, that it was this project, this effort was supposed to help coordination and cooperation on a regional scale. The second aspect of the same task was to secure, to ensure the security of radioactive sources, which we actually also did, but through a different project, which covers the Central and Eastern countries in Africa, members of the CBRN Center of Excellence of the European Union, based in Nairobi, Kenya. It also meant, of course, to help people recover control over orphan sources and develop the regulatory frameworks alongside with further effort to ensure cooperation on the borders to eliminate possible traffic. So these were the two instruments of the European Union which belonged to a different type of activities, namely the Instrument for Nuclear Safety Cooperation, which actually is better known for its regulatory cooperation forum, the first one historically in Europe being created, and the one which is which decided to single out Africa as a priority partner in its science for AU-EU partnership report of 2017. The other instrument was the one contributing to stability and peace, the one which actually developed this network of the EU CBRN centers of excellence, including the one in East and Central Africa. I will tell you only two words about the Instrument for Nuclear Safety Cooperation priorities, whereby Africa is being one of the priority areas for out of the EU activities shaping currently probably not a big part, only a 10th of the external action. But we hope in the success of this Yellowcake safety project because it would be considered to be indicative as to the possibility and desirability of further action in that particular field. And now a word about the platform for CBRN risk mitigation centers, which were 8 of them created through the instrument contributing to peace and stability. And as you see, in Africa, we have the biggest and the largest one, includes 11 countries in Central and East Africa, and probably for linguistic reasons also Ghana. But also we have the one which is more on the Mediterranean side of the continent. We have the Atlantic facade center, as well as the one covering the Arab Peninsula and the Middle East. So what about this particular project, the one on safety? We wanted to propose experience of the European Union and add elsewhere in regional approach by strengthening the development of Southern African Development Community potential in that regard, whereby it was rudimentary for the, to be honest, in terms of low priority paid to the developments in the nuclear safety side, and to strengthen and harmonize to the extent possible the regulatory frameworks for sustainable uranium mining and mining and associated transport. So we aimed at tackling both the safety and security aspects. In nowadays, both in academia, research, and practical actions of IAEA, a particular difference, attention is paid to the difference between safety and security aspects, but we remain convinced that from the national point of view of each and every involved institution, these form a nexus and they go hand in hand more often than not. We are also, in a way, trying to use new technology to help African partners help themselves by introducing a web-based informational tracking system that provides a platform for exchange of information on transportation of radioactive materials, and we managed to score in that regard considerable success. Here it is, the road, the transcontinental route 66, I would say. This starts from either Malawi or Tanzania across Zambia, the Caprivi Strand, and to reach in Namibia to the Walvis Bay, the one and only, for the moment in the region, licensed port for export of uranium. Why is it important? Because there are no facilities for further work on the uranium ore in the area, and it has to be exported to be enriched elsewhere. But we extended this system, which I was talking to you about the possibility to track the movements by adding to it DRC, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Madagascar, thus reaching to another system which is available in the Indian Ocean. It's called EURIS. The EURIS system allows to follow already maritime deliveries. Now, what we have managed to do is to help more than 120 professionals from national institutions in Zambia, Malawi, South Africa, Mozambique, Tanzania, Botswana, Eswatini, and DRC to actually, in some cases, we tried to provide advice in updating their framework, normative framework, but also to meet their obligations vis-a-vis, for example, Resolution 1540 and the reporting countries have to do there. 43 were the experts that were trained to use these information tracking systems, whereby we did not stop at that. We tried to provide exchange of experience by offering the best Europe has by organizing a steady visit to Finland. We did this with its renowned system of safety and security, nuclear safety and security, whereby the African partners from 13 countries were able to participate in this study visit. But we are mostly proud with our success in attracting the attention of the younger generation, whereby supporting the African organizations such as AING, the young professionals in nuclear, with over 400 participants we had. And to conclude, the most important, the message about the participation of women in our efforts, we are proud to say that it was quite substantive. Mostly our partners came from South Africa, Zambia, also Tanzania and Malawi, but the overall percentage of women's participation was more than a quarter of the entire people that were trained. With the other project, we had a particular scale here to illustrate for you that in each and every course, regrettably with the exemption of DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, we always had a substantial part of women participants in it. So with this, what would be further explained by Simon, Dr. Simon will tell you about what the findings of the reports that we had, particularly the regional reports, were, and we stimulated and developed even additional reports to countries which were earlier not part of these surveys, like Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and even Eswatini. And to conclude, I wanted to, of course, offer to you our websites, the ones that on the Novotica, that is the software company which created the information tracking system. You can follow, in fact, the route that we covered through this project, but also to draw your attention to our logo. I don't know whether everybody sees, but you see, it is not only the map of the countries involved, but one lady, which is guarding us from above, from heaven. So this was not by coincidence. We really rely very much on the participation of ladies in that exercise, in this effort.
Very much for the opportunity given me to share a portion of the report that was drafted in support of the SADC project. Taking it from Dr. Kamen's presentation, I'll just flip through some of the slides because he has already mentioned about that. The flow of the presentation is going to be the contributors who contributed to the report writing, that is the research, the overview of the ISTS project, which I'll not dwell much on it, uranium industries in Africa, transport infrastructure, nuclear security issues in Africa, and legal instruments that SADC countries have already acceded to or ratified or signed, and transport security measures that SADC themselves have established in transport of these uranium Yellowcake, and the findings of the report as well as the conclusion. For the contributors, we have four main writers, namely Simon Edu, myself. I was writing for Namibia. Tanzania was Dr. Lema, and Happy Muntanga was from Zambia, and Malawi was Master Simoni. Now, I'll not speak on this because Dr. Kamen has already spoken on that. And the main objective of the study, he also mentioned on that. I will just go straight to the uranium industries in Africa. If you read the book published by IEA in 2010, it says that there are 142 uranium mines in various stages of operation. Some of them are in operation, some of them are in the feasibility stage, and some are dormant and they are still looking at how they will bring them back. In terms of transport infrastructure, as uranium is mined in large quantities everywhere, and then it goes through a process where it becomes the Yellowcake, then it's converted, then it's enriched to form the fuel that we need for nuclear reactors. But unfortunately, no country in Africa that mines this uranium has a processing plant to be able to convert it or enrich it to the state that we need to use for as a nuclear fuel. This means that all mined and milled uranium all have to be transported by rail or by road on approved seaports. Mainly in SADC is through the Walvis Bay in Namibia. Which the most important thing we have to know here is that for many SADC countries, the mined and milled uranium are transported over a long distance through roads, railways, and they are stored along the ways, and sometimes cross international borders into countries that may not have or that may have varying nuclear regulatory capacities and conflicting requirements, because most of the countries have different regulations. And this presents safeguards, security, as well as safety challenges, not only to the uranium producing companies or uranium producing country, but to countries that the uranium or during the transport that they do transiting. So Dr. Kamen has already spoke about how far the distance they have to travel, they have to transport the uranium or the Yellowcake to Namibia. So I will not speak much on that. Now, the security issues that arise since the first nuclear security summit that was organized in Seoul, more emphasis have been laid on sensitive materials such as plutonium and highly enriched uranium. But there's less emphasis, or people pay less attention to the materials that are used in producing these sensitive materials. And dozens of countries in the world, including the SADC countries, SADC uranium producing countries, remain potential weak links in the global defense against nuclear terrorism, theft, and sabotage of nuclear materials. There are also organized criminals who are also looking for other opportunities to get hands of these materials and use it for malicious intent. Non-state actors can also exploit the security of vulnerable material during transport of these yellow cakes. And these and other conditions make SADC very vulnerable to transport security of yellow cake in the region. Now, some of the examples that has happened that we feel that it can affect the security of transport of yellow cake in the region. In September 2009, the insider threat was demonstrated when 2 employees of the Rosin uranium mine in Namibia and members of the Namibian Defense Forces were arrested, trying to smuggle 170 kg of uranium oxide concentrate to undercover police agent. Again, in Namibia, 324 kg of uranium ore was stolen from a not yet operational mine in August 2011. And somewhere in Brazil, in 2004, police seized 1,320 pounds of ore in pickup truck. Now, for the people to comply with the international rules, the SADC country to comply with international legal instruments, they have acceded or signed or ratified to some relevant, important conventions or legal instruments. One of them is the CPPNN, and they have, in terms of safety and security, and they have also assigned to non-proliferation treaties such as NPT. They also have other liability treaties, laws that they have signed, and in terms of organizational, they've signed 1975 Southern African Development Community Treaty. They also signed a SADC Nuclear Regulators Network in 1961 New Agenda Coalition. Now, the safeguards and security concerns, the IEA safeguards play an indispensable role in preventing the spread of nuclear weapons by ensuring that nuclear material remain in the peaceful use. Uranium mines and milling facilities handle large amounts of uranium. They are subject to IEA verification only when people have signed the additional protocol. Because the additional protocol obligations include providing information on mining activities, stocks of source materials, concentration, plant, export, and import. Under the additional protocol also, inspectors gather information of the location and operational status of uranium mines and mills and estimate the potential annual production capacity of uranium concentrate plants. And the people who have also signed on to CPPNM does not talk extensively about how to manage this, but it says that natural uranium should be protected in accordance with the prudent management practice. Now, according to the research that we did, the SADC countries who transport Yellowcake have also established some kind of measures. For example, during the transport routes, points of overnight where they will spend the night, temporary storage areas must have a security clearance approved from the regulators. The mining companies should also provide their own escort during transport. That's composed of guards and sometimes security personnel are also safety personnel are also added. And as Dr. Kamen said, satellite tracking devices are sometimes also installed with the help of ISTC, which is a web-based information tracking system. Then when it gets to the port, prior to loading of the containers on the vessel, the custom officers, custom officials verify the content against the document or the manifest that the truck drivers or whoever accompanied the truck brings. Then the containers are locked in the presence of these custom officers or custom officials. Then they fix a seal that shouldn't be broken or tampered with. until it reaches its final destination. The container should not also stay at the loading point for more than 5 days.
Dr. Adu, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're almost very close to your 15 minutes mark. Maybe please take 1 minute to wrap up. I know it's a very rich presentation, but let's have time for the other panelists as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And in terms of the findings or the gaps, there's unupdated laws and regulations because some of the laws that were promulgated were prior to independence, and this one does not reflect on the current issues or emerging threats in the region. Again, most other countries have laws for every mining activity in the country. But looking at the nature of uranium mines and the threat that comes associated with it, there should be a separate document or separate regulation covering uranium mining. There is lack of training and awareness on nuclear laws in the legal sector. There is also limited law enforcement. I will just go straight to the conclusion. The findings indicate that there was a fragment or limited laws and regulations governing uranium industry in different stages of uranium exploration. So they have pieces of laws which are not all that comprehensive. That needs to be rewritten again. In some cases, even the implementation of the general laws or the general regulations are insufficient due to lack of coordination and appropriate technical capacities. And again, thank you very much.
So we had a fascinating presentation from Dr. Velichkov and Dr. Adu, and some like as my prerogative as the moderator, I was hoping to tease out some interesting points from your presentation. And Dr. Velichkov, one idea that really ran through the sinews of your presentation was this idea of the sustainability of nuclear security culture. Uh, if you don't mind, could you please explain to us what do you mean when you talk about the sustainability of nuclear security culture, and from the project and the success of the project, what are some of the lessons that can be drawn and probably also applied for other regional nuclear security cooperations? And to Dr. Adu, thank you so much once again for your informative presentation. You really spoke at length about the importance of like safeguards in nuclear security. So if you can delve a little bit deeper on some of the safeguards that has been operational in the last several years, and that has created an impact, and essentially what are some of the next steps that can be undertaken in this respect. I really appreciated all the points that you made about like security, and especially when containers go to a port. What are some of the other aspects that one has to keep in mind when one is trying to ensure port security? And this is something that I allude to in terms of like what are also like some of the insider security risk within the scope of port security. And after you have like offered your remarks, I think it would be great to really listen to your remarks on also some of the interesting questions we have received from the audience. But saying that, I think your presentation on Yellowcake was great, but we also have some attendees who wants a bit of more elaboration on what is Yellowcake. So over to you.
You you asked the first questions to me, and I'll try to be this time very brief. What do we have in mind on sustainability? Sustainability, I mentioned on the last stage, that comes after cooperation and harmonization is in place. And this sustainability implies that the countries of the region would get accustomed to cooperate in and among themselves in order to keep requirements and to keep criteria for safety on the same level or comparative level, and will be able to exchange information between themselves in a more expedient and meaningful way to keep track of the deliveries. But when you asked the questions about what lessons also could be drawn from the experience we gather, indeed, it is the first lesson is quite clear, that it is and should be and remain an African-led effort. External factors could only support, but certainly not provide anything else but examples on cooperative effort by the countries of the region, and also examples of inclusiveness. Because we have to have in mind the communities through which these deliveries, the convoys pass, and the way that people should know and be more informed and better informed about the necessity, yes, indeed, safety to be observed, but also to demystify nuclear in a way, because this would create greater receptiveness by the public and not cause times and again a media overreaction or negative reaction that spreads the sentiment against the peaceful use of these nuclear materials.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Adu.
Oh, thank you very much for your question. I will start with the post security. As I've already mentioned, in addition to what I mentioned when the Yellowcake is in the port, like handing over to the people in the presence of the custom officers, adding the tags and seals till it gets to the final destination, we have to also make sure that there is a documentation of the transportation and the documentation of everything that you do and handed over to the people who are around that place. In addition to that, there should be a physical protection system. It's not as equal to high-risk facilities as highly enriched uranium facilities and others, but there should be a prudent management system put in place to protect the Yellowcake, else so that it will not get into the hands of the wrong people, or during the sabotage activities cannot take place, because even if you take the security aspect away, when there is a sabotage, it causes a huge sum of money. So there should be a prudent management system put in place in that respect. For the safeguard question that you put, we are researchers, and safeguard, because of the security nature of it, I don't think the response will be shared to a third party. Yes, so we are not privy to what the recommendations of the safeguard inspection are. But what I will say is that when the people sign to, then there is a kind of transparency about how many about the production, the quantity of production, and they will be able to extrapolate the amount of uranium ores that are produced at the end of the every year, so that it will prevent diversion of these materials for malicious intent. Thank you.
OPCW and chemical security in Africa. So basically, the outline of my presentation, I'll try in the beginning to introduce what is the OPCW and what it does for Africa is under the Africa program. It has specific initiative for Africa. And then I'll move on to the topic of this panel, which is related to the topic of this panel, which is the OPCW and chemical security in Africa. I'll touch a bit on the context in which we operate, the goals of the OPCW and the approach it follows to respond to the African needs and priorities in this area, and also to provide a brief update on the key activities that were undertaken by the OPCW in 2020. And then we will finish with useful references for the participants for further readings if they are interested, of course. Right, what is the OPCW? OPCW stands for Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. It is based in The Hague, the Netherlands. There you see our headquarters, but also we have a laboratory which is located 15 kilometers away from this building, our headquarters. It is the implementing agency of the Chemical Weapons Convention, which entered into force on the 29th of April, 1997, the same day the organization was established, with a budget for this year slightly over $87 million. Our Director General is His Excellency Ambassador Fernando Arias, a career diplomat from Spain. Then the mandate of the OPCW is fourfold. First is the destruction of declared stockpiles of chemical weapons worldwide. Second is preventing the reemergence of new chemical weapons. And third is providing assistance and protection to states parties against chemical incidents and attacks. And fourth is to enhance the economic and technological development of the member states through the peaceful applications of chemistry. It is noteworthy that the OPCW has received the Nobel Peace Prize for 2013 for its extensive efforts to eliminate chemical weapons. In terms of key achievement, in terms of membership, we have 193 states that are members of the OPCW, so almost we are near to universality. 4 states remain outside of the convention, which are in South Sudan, Egypt, Israel, and North Korea. So 98% of the global population lives under the protection of this convention. In addition, 98% of all declared stockpiles by possessor states parties have been destroyed. The remaining 2% efforts are ongoing to finish the destruction by December 2023 in the United States. Since its inception, nearly 5,000 industry inspections were conducted worldwide, and this is a way for us to make sure that there are no illicit or illegal use of chemicals for purposes prohibited under the convention. In terms of CWC domestication, which means the national implementation of the convention, we have 119 countries with comprehensive national legislation implementing the Chemical Weapons Convention, 93 other countries with legislation covering some initial measures, and we'll come to that later on. Every year, more or less 100 capacity building activities are offered to 2,000 chemistry professionals from developing member states, in addition to sponsorship of hundreds of scientific conferences, research projects, fellowship, transfers of lab equipment for the benefit of developing countries. Right. Now, what we do for Africa, or in the African context, is basically placed under specific initiative launched in 2007 by the OPCW Director General, which is the OPCW Africa Program. The longest name is the Program to Strengthen Cooperation with Africa, but it's also known as OPCW Africa Program. The goal is 2 main goals. First is to streamline the implementation of the Chemical Weapons Convention in the continent, and then address Africa needs in terms of, in relation to the convention, in terms of national implementation, chemical safety and security, and development through peaceful uses of chemistry. How do we address these goals? Is basically through a portfolio of tools, including capacity building, provision of technical assistance and advice, promotion of sponsorship, of exchange of scientific information and equipment. After 4 phases, this is a triennial approach in this program. So every 3 years, we start a new generation, new cycle of the program. Last year, 2020, it has witnessed the launching of the 5th phase of the program on the 1st of January last year. And it is progressing actively, I have to say. Right, now focusing on the topic of the OPCW and chemical security in Africa. just reduce this, yes. Right, the context. The context is more or less what you have seen for the nuclear, basically material as presented by the previous August presenters. It is more or less similar. So we have a continuous presence of terrorist threats and attacks in various regions of the continent. We have accidents. We notice that, and every now and then we hear news about and we see developments regarding accidents involving chemicals, whether it is in industry plant sites or during transportation and storage and so on and so forth. Through our interaction in our program and our contact with the stakeholders at the regional, sub-regional, national level in Africa, we notice a number of good experiences and best practices in the continent when it comes to legislation, policy, management, technical training, and so on. But then there is also, we feel that there is an insufficient coordination between these national stakeholders. And hence, there is a need for awareness raising, capacity building, improved coordination, and of course, enacting relevant legislation to help improve the situation of chemical safety and security in the continent. And this defines the goals of the OPCW in terms of tackling this matter. So basically, our efforts aimed at raising awareness regarding the importance of chemical security, develop stakeholder competencies, promote the exchange of international best practices in the area, including by inviting other stakeholders from outside the continent, and promote partnership and networking within and between African member states. Now, this is the most important slide for me, actually, because it encompasses the main thing that I want to share with you this afternoon. What is the approach that is followed by the OPCW for chemical security in Africa? It's an integrated approach. It's a multi-dimensional that it includes that aims at developing the capacities of African member states in the following area. First, advancing national implementation of the convention, enhancing control over or of cross-border transfer of toxic chemicals, promote chemical safety and security throughout chemical life cycle, develop protection and response capabilities against chemical incidents and attacks, and develop chemical laboratory competencies and infrastructure. Now, the rest of my presentation, I will tackle one by one what we do in these different areas. Right. In terms of advancing national implementation of the CWC, we believe, and it's our conviction, that the full and effective implementation of the Chemical Weapons Convention is in itself a major safeguard against chemical terrorism, as the convention includes several provisions that are very effective in preventing attacks involving chemicals and also managing the consequences of such attack. That include, for instance, there are provisions which obligate the member states to declare annually their production of chemicals, their imports, their export, their trade of chemicals. And then through the comparison of these declarations, we see if there is any discrepancies, any amount that is not accounted for. So this is an important way to see the circulation of chemicals between member states and within the member states themselves. In terms of situation related to the national implementation of the convention in Africa, we have 23 African states parties who have enacted a comprehensive CWC legislation. That means that a legislation domesticating the convention, but also administrative and penal measures that prevent local actors from misusing chemicals for activities related to terrorism, for instance. 10 countries have incomplete CWC legislation and 19 countries that are lacking a CWC legislation. And that is where we have really a challenge and we continue to work on. Now, a bit of visual. So what are the tools we use to enhance the implementation of the convention in the continent? It is basically capacity building and technical support activities through different workshops, including for national legal drafters, forum for national implementation legislation, general training course on the convention, coordination meetings, provision of technical advice and assistance, organization of influential visitors program for members of parliaments, for members of the executive. And this is a way for us to accelerate a bit the pace of adoption of national legislations. And then we also encourage South-South cooperation between the member states themselves. This is through, for instance, the National Authority Mentorship and Partnership Program. A visual of 2020, what happened there. It was a tough year, like for all of us with COVID-19, but we still switched into online delivery of for most of our activities. There you see some activities, mentorship, partnership program, lessons learned in January, visit by Moroccan parliamentarian delegation to the OPCW, coordination meeting with African National Authority, which are the focal points for the implementation of the convention. Online general training course regarding the convention for national authorities and other stakeholders like customs, for instance, for different states parties in Africa. And then it's important to ensure, as I said in the beginning, the coordination between the different stakeholders, relevant stakeholders. So we organize as well meetings for representative of chemical industries and national authorities, the government representatives. Also consultation, informative meeting and coordination meeting that allows us to stay aware of where the situation is, where do we stand in terms of what are the new trends, what are the new challenges, and then devise the new ways and update our courses and our way to respond to these challenges. Right, the second area is enhancing control of cross-border transfer of toxic chemicals. This is basically done through the provision of capacity building for member states to implement the convention provisions related to the transfer of scheduled chemicals. So therefore, we try to build an in-depth understanding of the relevant convention provision, tools to identify toxic chemicals for customs, for instance, approach to handle suspicious chemical shipments, procedure to report import and export of scheduled chemicals, and we provide as well practical advice on implementing those procedures. Programs and activities, we partner with the World Customs Organization for the delivery of courses on the transfer regime of scheduled chemicals under the CWC. Train the trainer courses, we offer as well stakeholder forums, and we organize on the technical side courses for analytical chemists supporting labs that support customs services on the continent, of course. In 2020, we had the major course with the World Customs Organization offered to 34 participants from 10 African member states. Third, promoting chemical safety and security throughout the chemical life cycle. Chemical life cycle that include the extraction, the production, the transportation, the processing, the storage, and the end user, basically. So it includes everything. So the focus areas in this area, in this part, include management of chemical inventory, chemical supply chain, chemical waste, transportation of dual-use chemicals, and toxic chemicals. In terms of the tools that are used in this area, so again, capacity building workshop, training courses on chemical safety and security, provision of tailor-made technical advice to develop national chemical safety and security management roadmaps for each state party in Africa. And then we put the focus as well on networking, and we have devised an alumni network for chemical safety and security that is global, but it also includes African participants. Events in 2020, again, it is courses, both for the operational level, but also at the leadership and industries and customs and so on and so forth. So that is basically, we are combining training for the operational level and the executive level, the leadership and the different stakeholder area. Continuation of those courses. Fourth is to develop the protection and response capabilities against chemical incidents and attacks. So that is done through the provision of basic, advanced, and specialized training, as well as technical advice to African states parties with a view to developing their capabilities to prevent and to respond as well to chemical incidents and attacks. So our efforts is directed towards auditing national protection measures, provision of assistance, of advice, of information, of protective purposes, decontamination, awareness raising activities as well, basic and advanced courses and exercises, and specialized courses as well. These are visual of what we do in the context of our training in Africa. Last year, we had also a fair share of events dedicated to Africa. Most of them were conducted online. Virtual tabletop exercises, online basic courses, refresher courses for instructors. We also encourage the South-South cooperation and different parts. There you notice, of course, that we deal at the regional level, but also at the sub-regional level, at the level of the regional economic communities that would enhance and project further our capabilities for training and for capacity development. In addition to that,
Sir, if I may, we're actually really close to the time. If you kindly just wrap your presentation in maybe 1 minute, because we're really closing in on our also virtual coffee break time. So
very good. Yep. All right. So we also have a specific project for different areas of the continent, and therefore the Southern African Development Community, we have started last year a specific project to enhance the assessment of existing chemical risk and response capacity at the national level. The last area is developing chemical laboratory competencies and infrastructure through a variety of technical courses that are towards chemical scientists and lab technicians, and so on. In addition to sponsorship of activities for scientists and researchers, such as fellowship and other advanced laboratories in Europe, United States, and so on. The support for research projects and the support for transfer of equipment, lab equipment between labs in Africa and others in other continents. So events in 2020, different courses, as you could see. There were 2 transfer of lab equipment from Germany to Tanzania and Sudan, sponsorship of 5 fellowships and 12 research projects. And I believe this is one of my, the last slide. So in addition to the bulk of the Africa program is funded through the regular budget of the OPCW, but we also have devised special project for extra budgetary funding that touches a bit on the area that I was presenting in terms of emergency response, cross-border control, laboratory development, and so on. These are useful references for the attention of the participants. And that ends my presentation. Thank you.
Dawsar, thank you so much for a very comprehensive presentation. I think you really provided an important overview of the OPCW's approach towards chemical security issues in Africa. And I think one of the key words that you mentioned was is the fact that it has a more integrated approach. So great points really noted about all the important fellowships and training developments activities that has been ongoing. So we really need to quickly go in a break, but before that, I, as my prerogative as the moderator, I wanted to uh, really listen to your reflections on the fact that we are trying to strengthen the norm against chemical use, right, globally, and the fact that that the gap of holding chemical users and perpetrators of chemical use accountable is something that is often coming up in discussions, not only at the OPCW level, but also in different parts of the world. So I just wanted your reflection on what are the next step for like having a more accountable kind of framework and architecture of holding chemical perpetrators, chemical weapons perpetrators accountable.
Right. Thank you very much, Sylvia. I mean, accountability is key. And the OPCW strives and endeavors on a daily basis to maintain the norm against chemical weapons worldwide through, of course, providing a forum for the different stakeholders, through the exchange of information, through the processing of data from different, member states, different stakeholders, and so on. And it is, of course, very important to maintain and to uphold the norm against chemical weapons. Now, the CWC, the Chemical Weapons Convention, does provide for cases where there is a breach of the convention. So there are some verification mechanisms, like inspections. Like one member state can demand a challenge inspection, and another member says on the background of doubts of developing chemical weapons program. That is one. Another provision, very important provision, the OPCW, of course, remain a technical organization, so it's a scientist organization, right? And it also provides capacity building for its member state, but it's not a tribunal or use of chemical weapons and so on. But it provides its expertise to the United Nations in terms of whenever a chemical weapon is used or chemical is used as a weapon. So we provide investigation capabilities to the United Nations. I don't know if you heard about the investigation and identification team, for instance, that is active in Syria on the background of use of chemical weapons and so on. And there is one important provision in the CWC that that provides the possibility for the organization to forward any matters that represent a breach to international peace and security to even the Security Council of the United Nations. So therefore, it provides us with the with tools. The founding fathers and of the convention provided the OPCW with tools in order to follow any breach till the end. But then, of course, the member states are the governors of the organizations, and the other forum, which is the United Nations Security Council, is the forum which take the decision under which chapter and so on. I'm sure that the participants are very well familiar with the Charter of the United Nations.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate the fact that you make it clear that it is, after all, a more scientific organization, and it's like, and within its capacity, it probably should not be seen as a more tribunal outfit. Appreciate those remarks. With that, we are close to our first session. I wanted to extend thank you to Dr. Velichkov, Dr. Adu, and Mr. Drissi for your very informative and comprehensive presentations. As we come back from the break, we have another two fascinating presentations, but I was hoping if our panelists are all right, and if we probably can jump into our break a couple of minutes later. Would you be willing to have questions from the audience? I think that would be really great, because we have a fascinating participation and we are getting in so many questions. So is it all right if we, before we break into our break, if we have another round of Q&A?
Of course.
Okay. Margarita, is that all right with you?
This is perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so I was hoping maybe we can bring in some of our audience to ask a question, if that is all right, or how do we go about it?
You could call a person's name, and I will promote him to the panelists, and they could ask a question in person.
Okay, that sounds great. So I am, bear with me, I am opening the chat box. So I had seen several questions for Dr. Adu, and if I was hoping if maybe Altrin Oberio can be called upon. He had some really interesting questions on sharing greater information on storage and sampling of materials.
Yes, she's joining us as a panelist, and if she wants to say this in person, she's welcome to. Altrin, you're online. Unmute yourself, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Hello.
We can hear you very well. Please go ahead with your question.
Okay, so this is for Dr. Adu.
Okay.
Hello. So
Hello,
I
I'm
was
here.
wondering, whatever you talked about focused more on transportation, but the challenge we see in Africa on CBRN security doesn't only concentrate on transportation, but also on sample reception or material reception, storage, disposal of whatever remains, and also the issue on checks on load balances, because that's where the loopholes are with regards to being able to smuggle away something or do something that is not in by non-state actors mostly, or even state actors or insider threats.
Can I answer?
Yes, please.
Is it a question or contribution?
It's a question. Like, sorry, I
Okay.
didn't finish my question. So you focused more on transportation. Can you talk a bit more on the other aspects of handling CBRN materials? Of course, you are talking about yellow cake, but if you can diverge more on other aspects, because it revolves, what happens with the yellow cake also happens with dual use chemicals, also happens with the biological agents. It's just the same concept. So I wanted you to explain more on the other aspects of storage, load balance checks or check balances, and disposal.
Okay. Thank you very much for your question. Now, I would like to use, yeah. Sorry about that, because my topic that was given to me was more on transport of Yellowcake
Yes,
security. And talking about other aspects, just like I'm a nuclear scientist, so I'll limit myself to radiological materials and nuclear materials. So if you have radiological materials or nuclear materials, then the best way to protect it is to get a physical protection system or nuclear security measures instituted, and it's to be based on the regulations or the nuclear law of the country. So the best way to do is first to come out with a regulatory framework that protects the nuclear material or the radiological material in the country and enforce those laws on the licensees. So regulatory activities such as inspection, authorization, and enforcement needs to be carried out so that you make sure that the people who are housing these materials do well to protect safely, secure, and be able to safeguard it. Is it okay, or I should add more?
I was writing it down. If you have information, I will appreciate.
Okay. So another way of securing those materials is through bilateral and multilateral arrangements with neighboring countries as well as other countries as well, so that you can transmit information or to facilitate maybe movement of any material, so that if somebody wants to bring a material outside the country, the border organizations can alert you. And one way of doing it is that for the regulatory authority, there should be a measure that whoever is bringing a material inside the country should have a permit of import. And if you want to export it outside the country, you should have an export permit. So at the border where the custom officers are, you need to show these material, you need to show a document that yes, the regulatory authority has approved that your practice that you are bringing into the country, you'll be able to keep it safe, the security measures on it are adequate, and all other aspects concerning the requirement has been fulfilled before you can bring the source in or the material in. Then there is an issue of awareness creation. You know, awareness creation is very much important for the people to know that whatever even you are bringing in is a radioactive material, even if you want to conceal it in other material. Because detection by instrument is not always accurate, but detection by maybe an alert. If somebody knows that this material is this and is capable of doing this, somebody can lay hands on it and use it for RDD or whatever malicious intent the person wants to use it to. So awareness creation is
Dr.
also very much important.
Dr. Adu, thank you so much for your response, and Altrine, thanks for that fascinating questions. Before we break, I decided to club in together a couple of questions, and it would be great if Dr. Velichkov and Dawsar, if you can just like have 1 minute remarks before we just wind up this session. And the questions for Mr. Dawsar is, if there are detectors used for identification of chemical concentration release in the environment, what do you mean by equipments exchange program, and can non-member states also benefit from OPCW's program and technical support? That's a question for you, Mr. Dawsar. And for Dr. Velichkov, I think this was one important question that really came up in several of the other questions, and it just alludes to the fact, how is personal integrity determined before they engage in transportation of uranium, and also if there is any specific quantity that should not be exceeded while extracting or transporting to a given region. Thank you.
Shall I start?
Yes, please.
Okay, so with regard to the question on the detectors, basically in the world of chemicals and chemical agents that are related or let's say included in the Chemical Weapons Convention Annex on chemicals, most of the families of chemicals are detectable through GCMS, which is gas chromatography mass spectrometry technique. For that, there is a gas chromatography mass spectrometry, of course, instruments that are used for this. This is for the most common, let's say, but there are also some other analytical techniques. What happens if there is like a release in the environment, water, oil, air, and so on, that there needs to be a sample that is taken, and that is, of course, analyzed through the instruments I was mentioning, the GCMS instruments. So that is basically, I'm not a chemist, but this is my understanding, and that's what I know for sure how things are done. And then we train, of course, experts from our member states to use the GCMS through our analytical skills development courses and so on. Right, in terms of equipment exchange program, so basically the OPCW runs this program since the year 2000, and the idea is to facilitate transfer between donors and receivers or recipient of lab chemical instruments like the CMS I was mentioning, like the LCMS, like the FTIR, and so on and so forth. All these are technical terms for, of course, the participant I might know as chemists and nuclear scientists. And the OPCW does not provide itself equipment, but then it makes the matchmaking, and then it funds the transfer of this equipment, and it covers the fees for training in the recipient laboratory for technicians and scientists to train on the equipment that is basically donated or transferred. And there is, I just responded to the question in the chat, there is a opcw.org, and then you go to International Cooperation Equipment Exchange. There you'll find extensive information in addition to the form that to convey the request. And that, of course, needs to bear the endorsement of the national authority, which is the focal point for the implementation of the convention in your respective countries. That is how the procedure is, basically. Now, regarding to non-member states, can they benefit from our training? The short answer is no. Basically, the idea is to benefit the member states of the organization, to those which are paying for the budget of the organization. Nevertheless, from time to time, we invite scientists and stakeholders from non-state parties to the convention in order to show them the benefits of joining the Chemical Weapons Convention and to include them in some of our training. But this is not the rule, basically. This is not the practice, rather the exceptions, basically, yeah? I saw a couple of questions regarding Lebanon. If Sylvia could permit me to
maybe we can go to Dr. Velichkov, if that's all right.
No.
Thank you for this opportunity to respond to the two questions that you selected from among the several ones that were written. I would try to sum it up that we are discussing the answers lay in the relationship between the government authorities and the industries. Because we should not forget that uranium mining, like any mining, is a entrepreneurial activity, and companies that are involved in mining usually are also related to or provide services of transporting organizations. In this sense, there is no limitation, to the best of my knowledge, about the optimum size of individual delivery, it depends very much on the economic considerations and the moment that one would even reckon on the price of uranium, how much of a demand it will trigger. But of course, there are quite clear limitations to and requirements for the barrels that are used, for number of barrels at a particular vehicle. And this is what we actually track. We track the vehicles through the information tracking systems that we were referring to earlier. Equally, it must be said about the integrity issue. Yes, indeed, it is tremendously important issue from security-wise, but we have here, in terms of escorts to the convoys, two types of security guards. One is usually the transportation company, which takes care of such an escort, but also in some countries, and I can give you the example of Zambia, the national police and even in some cases, the military forces are also called upon to ensure a smooth passage and if need be, well-guarded stopovers on the road of this difficult and long 5,500 kilometers long journey from mines in Malawi to Wolfish Bay. In other words, through the licensing capability powers that the national regulator is empowered with, and through the competencies to issue the licensing on the action, the government authorities can have a requirement for well-vetted teams that would be recruited and used for these purposes. But I don't believe that the regulator themselves could guarantee for the anyone who is employed in this circumstances. It has to be a stakeholders cooperation and coordination in order to avoid and prevent any misuse or misbehavior.